Why did you send me this?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Who are you sending that photo to? The voice came from behind me, low, dangerous, and possessive. I turned, still holding my phone. Dante Greco, my boss, who was also a Mafia boss, was inside the fitting room with me. His dark eyes were fixed on my phone screen. His jaw clenched tight. I was wearing a red dress molded to my body. I looked hot, and he was furious. "That's none of your business," I said, trying to sound calm. He took a step and got closer. "Everything about you is my business, Madison." That's when I realized I was screwed.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
Chapter 1. The Woman Who Won't Fall.
You don't impress easily.
The situation was really difficult because of something simple. I needed a job and the chance came up to get hired, and I really needed that job badly. It wasn't a matter of wanting, it was pure necessity. The kind that makes you wake up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling and calculating how long you can survive before the bills swallow you alive. Debts were piling up. The rent on my tiny Brooklyn apartment went up every year, and adult life was teaching me in the worst possible way that dreams don't pay bills. When I saw the ad looking for a manager for an elite club called Velvet Rose, I didn't think twice before sending my resume, because I was qualified, had solid management experience, and was too desperate to be picky. What I didn't expect was for the interview to take place in an office that seemed to have been pulled straight out of some Italian luxury architecture magazine. Everything in shades of black and gold, furniture that probably cost more than my used car, a panoramic view of Manhattan that made my apartment look like a moldy shoebox, and sitting behind an absurdly large desk, leafing through my resume with long, elegant fingers, was him. Dante Greco was the type of man you look at and immediately know means trouble. Impeccable, dark suit, tailored to that body that probably hid muscles under the expensive fabric, jet black hair perfectly slicked back, strong jaw that looked carved from Italian marble. But it was his eyes that really caught me off guard, dark as espresso, intense in a way that made you feel like he could read every thought you were trying to hide. When he lifted his gaze from the paper to me, I felt something strange twist in my stomach, a mix of nervousness and something I completely refused to identify. "Impressive," he said, and his voice had that subtle Italian accent that turned each word into something dangerously seductive. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with attention that should have made me uncomfortable, but instead just made my spine straighten in silent defiance. "Why do you want to work here?" I could have given some elaborate answer about professional growth and career opportunities, but apparently my brain decided brutal honesty was the best strategy. "Because I need money, and I'm good at what I do." His lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but carried something like genuine amusement. "You're direct. I like that." He tilted his head slightly, and I felt the full weight of all that attention focused on me. "And you are?" I asked, almost insolently. "The owner, Dante Greco." He extended his hand across the desk, and when I shook it, the warmth of his palm against mine was unexpectedly intense, firm and secure, in a way that was too much for a simple professional greeting. I let go quickly. "Italian? Yes. Got a problem with that?" "No, just..." I forced a polite smile, trying to ignore the way he still held my gaze. "Just curious. You seem intense." Something changed in his expression, became sharper, more present, as if I'd said exactly the right thing or completely the wrong thing. "You have no idea. It should have been a warning. I should have gotten up," thanked him politely, and walked out of that office before getting into something too complicated. But then he said, "You're hired," in that naturally commanding voice, and all I could think was that I'd finally be able to pay my bills on time. I had no idea what I was starting. The first few months were exactly what I expected, just multiplied by 10. I organized events that moved more money in a single night than I earned in half a year, managed a team of 15 people who quickly learned that I didn't accept half-assed work, and increased Velvet Rose's profits so impressively that even Dante had to admit that hiring me had been his best recent decision. I worked hard, arrived early, left late, and made a point of proving I deserved every cent of my generous salary. Dante apparently was impressed and attracted, which became obvious too fast. "You look good in black," he commented one night, appearing beside me while I checked the main bar's inventory list. I didn't even look up from the clipboard. "It's the uniform. Everyone here wears it. It looks better on you," I sighed, finally looking at him with the most neutral expression I could produce. "Mr. Greco, I have work to do." I noticed frustration passing through his dark eyes before being replaced by something like stubborn determination. "Call me Dante. I prefer to keep things professional." I walked past him without waiting for a response, completely ignoring the heat I felt when my arm almost brushed his. "Excuse me." I heard Marino, the man who seemed to be Dante's permanent shadow, laugh softly from somewhere nearby. "Boss, she just blew you off." "I noticed," Dante replied, and even without looking I could hear the irritation mixed with something dangerously close to interest in his voice. "First time that's ever happened to you." There was a pause that was too long. "Yes. And that makes you—" I quickened my pace before hearing the answer, because some masochistic part of me already knew what he was going to say, and I definitely didn't need that complication in my already sufficiently complicated life. She didn't hear it, but Dante answered that it made him obsessed. The situation with other men trying to flirt with me became an irritating pattern. Rich men frequented Velvet Rose thinking money bought attention, and I had to repeat polite versions of "not interested" more times than any woman should have to in a professional environment, until one night, a particularly persistent client decided my refusals were just coyness to be overcome. "Hey, beautiful. How about a drink?" He appeared beside me at the bar, with a confident smile and the scent of an overly expensive cologne. "No thank you." I continued checking the premium bottles, not giving it much attention. "Come on, just one drink." I said no. I turned to him with my best professional smile that didn't reach my eyes. "If you need something for the event, I can call a waiter." He took a step closer, invading my personal space in a way that made all the alarms in my head go off. "Don't be difficult." She said no. Dante's voice cut through the air like broken glass, cold and absolutely deadly. He appeared so fast and silent that I didn't even notice his approach. Suddenly he was there, between me and the client, and the temperature around us seemed to drop about 10 degrees. "Do you have a hearing problem?" The man immediately backed away, his face losing all color as he recognized who was in front of him. Sorry, I didn't know she was—" The client practically tripped over his own feet running away. I watched him disappear into the crowd, and then turned to Dante with my arms crossed, ignoring the way my heart was still beating fast for reasons I refused to analyze. I could have handled that myself, I know. He looked at me in that intense way that was becoming dangerously familiar, as if he were seeing through all the professional masks I wore, but I wanted to handle it. "Why? Because nobody bothers you." "Not in my club." There was possessiveness in his voice that should have irritated me, that should have made me complain about inappropriate boss behavior, but instead it just created a confused knot of emotions I wasn't ready to untangle. "This is your club," I repeated, giving deliberate emphasis to each word, "but I'm not yours." His smile was slow, dangerous, loaded with a promise that made something tighten in my stomach. Yet, never. I walked past him, feeling the heat radiating from his body even without us touching, my skin tingling with the proximity that shouldn't affect me so much. "Excuse me." I managed to take about 5 steps before hearing Marino comment, his voice loaded with poorly disguised amusement. "She rejects you all the time and you just get more interested." I should have kept walking. I should have completely ignored the conversation that clearly wasn't for my ears. But my feet stopped on their own, and I found myself standing just around the corner, pretending to check something on my tablet, while Dante's voice responded, lower, but still audible. "Because she's different. All the others want money, power, a name. But her?" He paused, and I could perfectly imagine the thoughtful expression on his face. "She wants me to get out of her way. It's refreshing. It's irritating. But mainly, she's sexy." My heart did a stupid jump that I vehemently ignored. "You're a goner, boss," Marino said, and you could hear the smile in his voice. Completely. I forced my legs to move before hearing anything else that would complicate the already absurdly complicated situation even more, because accepting that my boss was a goner for me was exactly the kind of problem I didn't need, didn't want, and definitely couldn't afford to consider. Months passed. Dante was in his office, fingers drumming impatiently on the desk, while Marino watched him with that expression that made it clear he already knew something was about to happen. The afternoon light came through the huge windows, painting everything in golden tones, but the atmosphere in the room was charged with the kind of tension that preceded potentially stupid decisions. "I need Madison to come with me tomorrow," Dante finally said, breaking the silence. "Meeting with Viktor Kozlov." Marino raised an eyebrow. "The Russian? Why bring her?" "Because Viktor wants to meet my woman before closing the deal." Dante leaned back in his chair, jaw tense. "He doesn't do business with single men without family and stability." "And you're going to—" "I'm going to pretend Madison is my girlfriend temporarily." The way he said the last word made it clear there was nothing temporary about his intentions, only the excuse. Marino laughed, a genuinely amused sound. "She's going to love that. That's why I'm going to pay very well," Dante replied, and something dangerous gleamed in his dark eyes, a mix of determination and possessiveness that Marino knew all too well. $10,000 for one night pretending to be my girlfriend. She needs money. She'll accept. That's manipulation, boss. That's strategy. Dante's smile was slow, calculated, and absolutely ruthless. And she'll look beautiful in an expensive dress. Everybody wins. Marino shook his head, but couldn't hide the complicit smile. "You're a goner. You've said that before, because it's still true." Dante didn't respond, just turned his chair to look at Manhattan through the windows. But the small smile that curved his lips made it clear he knew exactly what he was doing, and that 6 months of patient pursuit were about to turn into something much more interesting. Chapter 2. The Indecent Proposal.
Just one night.
The next morning started too normal for what was about to happen. I arrived at Velvet Rose at my usual time, coffee in hand, mental to-do list already organized by priority, completely unprepared for what Dante Greco was planning. The message arrived before I could even turn on my computer, brief and direct like everything that came from him. Come to my office now. I climbed the stairs trying to ignore the way my stomach tightened at those 2 words, because in 6 months working there I had learned that summons to Dante's office rarely meant simple things. I knocked on the dark wooden door and entered without waiting for a response, finding him sitting behind that absurd desk, fingers interlaced, gaze fixed on me with an intensity that immediately put me on alert. "I need to talk to you," he said, and there was something different in his tone, something I couldn't completely identify, but that made all my instincts scream that this wouldn't be a conversation about beverage inventory or future events. I crossed my arms, keeping a safe distance between us. If this is to invite me to dinner again, the answer is still no. His lips curved into that smile that always seemed to hold dangerous secrets. "It's not dinner, it's for work." The word work managed to capture my attention completely, because work meant professional, meant something I could handle without unnecessary emotional complications. "What kind of work?" Dante leaned back in his chair, studying me with attention that made my skin tingle even through my clothes. "I need you to accompany me to a meeting as my—" He made a deliberate pause, and something in his gaze changed, became more intense, as my girlfriend. The silence that followed was so heavy I could hear my own heart beating fast in my ears. I blinked once, twice, trying to process if I'd heard correctly, if Dante Greco had really just asked what I thought he'd asked. "What?" The word came out in a disbelieving whisper. "Viktor Kozlov is a Russian businessman and he only does business with stable men. Married. Committed." He spoke each word carefully, as if explaining a complicated contract, except the subject was infinitely more absurd than any legal document. "He wants to meet my partner before signing the contract." My brain finally caught up with my mouth. "And you want me to pretend to be that partner?" "Yes, just for one night. Just a dinner." Dante counted on his fingers as if he were listing grocery items, not asking me to play the role of fake girlfriend. "You act like a girlfriend." He signs the deal and done. It's over. I should have said no immediately. I should have walked out of that office and completely forgotten that absurd conversation, but some masochistic and overly curious part of me needed to know. "And you don't have a real girlfriend?" Dante looked at me in a way that made the air leave my lungs, dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that seemed to burn through all the defenses I tried to maintain between us. "No, the only woman I'm interested in doesn't give me the time of day." I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rise up my neck because it was impossible not to understand the hint, impossible not to notice the way he looked at me while speaking. But I wasn't going to take that bait, wasn't going to turn a work proposal into something personal and complicated. "How much are you paying?" He smiled, genuinely amused. "Direct as always. I'll pay $10,000. I almost choked on air. $10,000? For one night. Pretty dress, smiles, and fake love. He tilted his head, and there was challenge in his gaze now. Subtle provocation that made me want to accept just to prove I could. "Can you do that?" I pretended to consider the proposal longer than I actually needed to, because $10,000 would pay half my debts, because $10,000 meant financial security I hadn't had in years, because $10,000 was worth one uncomfortable night pretending to have feelings I definitely didn't have for my impossible and irritatingly attractive boss. Pretend I love you? It'll have to be Oscar-worthy acting, but I made my own dramatic pause. But for 10,000? Yes, I can do it. The smile that lit up his face was too satisfied, too victorious, as if I had just fallen exactly into the trap he'd set. "Great. Tomorrow we're going to buy an appropriate dress." "I have dresses," I protested automatically, because the idea of Dante Greco choosing clothes for me seemed dangerously intimate, crossed lines I preferred to keep well-defined. "Not for this. Victor expects ostentation, luxury." He got up from his chair, walked around the desk with that predatory grace that always made me think of a big cat hunting, and stopped too close to me. "I'm taking you to a boutique." "You don't need to," I began, but he interrupted me with a look that left no room for argument. "I do. You're going to represent my taste." His eyes traveled over my face slowly, lingeringly, in a way that made my breath catch. "And my taste is impeccable." I rolled my eyes, refusing to let his proximity visibly affect me. "Of course it is. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., don't be late." It wasn't a request. It was an order, said in that naturally commanding voice that probably worked on everyone except me. "I'm never late." I lifted my chin, keeping my gaze steady on his, even when every instinct screamed to create distance between our bodies. "I know." Something softened in his expression, became almost affectionate in a way that made my stomach do that stupid jump again. "It's one of the things I appreciate about you." I felt the heat rising to my cheeks and hated myself for it. "Save the flirting. You're going to need it tomorrow when I pretend to like you." Dante laughed, genuinely, and the sound was so unexpectedly warm, it almost made me smile too. "You're impossible. And yet, You hired me. I walked past him toward the door, finally allowing my lungs to fill with air that wasn't saturated with that masculine cologne I was starting to recognize too late. Who's the impossible one here? I left before he could respond, before I could do something stupid like agree to any other absurd proposal that man invented. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but even from outside I could hear when Marino appeared in the office, voice loaded with poorly disguised curiosity. Boss, I found something out. I should have kept walking and gone back to my own office and focused on the real work I needed to do. But my feet stopped on their own, and I found myself leaning against the wall next to the door, listening to a conversation that definitely wasn't for my ears. What? Dante's voice sounded too casual to be genuine. Victor doesn't require a wife. He's single. The silence that followed lasted long enough for me to perfectly visualize the dangerous smile that was probably forming on Dante's face. Yes, but Madison doesn't know that. And doesn't need to know. My stomach dropped. That son of a bitch had lied. You lied to have an excuse to spend time with her? Marino asked, and there was admiration mixed with incredulity in his voice. It's not a lie. It's just strategy, Dante replied, and I could hear the sound of liquid being poured into a glass, probably that expensive whiskey he kept in his office, and she's going to look beautiful in an expensive dress. You're a goner, boss. You said that yesterday, because it's still true. I forced my legs to move before hearing anything else, before fully processing the information that Dante Greco had just blatantly lied to manipulate me into spending time with him. I should be furious. I should go back there and throw the proposal back in his face. I should do many things that sensible women would do, but $10,000 was still $10,000. And if Dante Greco wanted to pay that absurd amount just to have me at a dinner pretending to be his girlfriend, then who was I to complain? He was going to find out I was a much better actress than he imagined, that I could fake indifference as well as he faked that this was all just work. I went back to my office with a small smile on my lips, because if there was a game being played, then two could play. And Dante Greco was about to find out that Madison DeLuca wasn't a woman who let herself be manipulated without fighting back. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. was going to be interesting. Very interesting. Chapter 3. Shopping.
That dress is dangerous.
And tension. The boutique was on one of those Manhattan streets where even the air seemed more expensive, where window displays showed unique pieces with price tags that would make most people faint. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, because punctuality was a principle I didn't negotiate, wearing my favorite jeans and a simple cotton blouse that made it clear I wasn't trying to impress absolutely anyone. I leaned against the glass wall next to the entrance, trying to ignore the nervousness. The sound of a powerful engine made me look up, and of course Dante Greco would arrive in a car that probably cost more than my entire apartment. Black, gleaming under the afternoon sun, the type of vehicle that made pedestrians stop to look with admiration or envy. He got out of the car with that ease that seemed to come so naturally to men accustomed to power. Punctual, he said as he approached, taking off his sunglasses and letting those dark eyes travel over my body from top to bottom in a way that should irritate me, but instead just made my temperature rise a few degrees. Always. I put my phone back in my pocket, keeping my tone professional and casual. Let's get this over with. I have things to do later. Something gleamed in his gaze, curiosity mixed with that intensity I was starting to recognize too late. Like what? None of your business. Dante took a step toward me, deliberately reducing the distance between us, his voice dropping to that lower, possessive tone that always made my skin tingle. Everything about you is my business. I lifted my chin, refusing to let his proximity visibly affect me. You're paying me $10,000 for one night of pretending. That doesn't buy me. The smile he gave me was slow, dangerous, loaded with a promise that made my stomach do that annoying jump. Doesn't buy you yet. I rolled my eyes and turned toward the boutique entrance, ignoring the heat I felt when I walked past him, when the scent of that masculine cologne I was starting to recognize invaded my senses. Let's get this over with before I change my mind. The interior of the boutique was exactly the type of place I imagined Dante Greco frequented regularly. Everything in shades of immaculate white and sophisticated gold, perfect lighting that made even the mannequins look like runway models. A saleswoman appeared almost instantly, all professional smiles and rehearsed elegance, her eyes visibly lighting up when she recognized Dante. Mr. Greco, what a pleasure to see you again. She practically glowed with enthusiasm, and I fought the urge to roll my eyes at the way she looked at him, as if he were some kind of gift sent directly from the Italian heavens. I need a dress. For her, of course. Dante pointed at me without ceremony, and I felt the saleswoman's professional and assessing gaze slide over me, calculating measurements and style in a matter of seconds. It needs to be something unforgettable. The saleswoman studied me for another moment, walking around me once with critical but kind eyes, and then smiled with genuine approval that caught me by surprise. She's beautiful, Mr. Greco. Absolutely perfect body. I have wonderful options that will make her more than stunning. I felt heat rising to my cheeks at the direct compliment, but before I could respond or say thank you, the saleswoman was already disappearing among organized racks of clothes, returning moments later with 5 dresses carefully draped over her arm. Each one was more beautiful than the last, fabrics that seemed to flow like liquid under the perfect light, cuts that promised to transform any body into museum-worthy works of art. She hung them delicately on a mobile rack nearby, and my jaw dropped to the floor when I saw the prices on the tags. "This costs more than 3 months of my rent," the phrase escaped before I could filter it. Dante didn't even blink, as if we were discussing the price of coffee and not dresses that literally cost thousands of dollars each. "So what? Try them on. I don't need something so—" I started to protest, but he cut me off with a single look that left absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. "Madison, try them on now." His voice had that tone of absolute command he probably used to give orders in his dangerous world, where nobody questions him. I crossed my arms over my chest, refusing to give in so easily, without at least showing some resistance. "You're bossy." His lips curved into a smile that carried genuine amusement, mixed with that constant possessiveness that seemed to be an integral part of his personality. "And you're impossible to deal with and stubborn to the last strand of hair. We match perfectly." I huffed with fake irritation, but grabbed 3 of the dresses from the rack, because arguing in front of the saleswoman who was watching us with poorly disguised interest seemed like a worse option than simply obeying this time. The saleswoman guided me to the fitting rooms located at the back of the boutique, small individual rooms closed off with heavy velvet curtains, equipped with full-length mirrors and perfectly designed lighting. I closed the thick curtain behind me and took a deep breath, trying to process the complete surreality of the situation I had voluntarily gotten myself into. I was about to try on dresses that cost small fortunes to wear at a fake dinner, pretending to be the girlfriend of a man who had blatantly lied about the entire situation just to have me by his side for one night. The first dress was blue, a deep and rich sapphire tone that contrasted beautifully with my darker skin tone. I put it on carefully to avoid damaging the obviously expensive fabric, adjusting the delicate straps on my shoulders, and turned slowly to the full-length mirror. Pretty. Definitely pretty. The cut was elegant, the fit perfect, the color absolutely stunning. But something was missing, something intangible I couldn't identify. It wasn't the right dress. It wasn't the one that would make Victor Kozlov or anyone else believe that Dante Greco was hopelessly in love with me. I took it off quickly, hanging it back on the hanger carefully. The second was black, elegant in a classic and timeless way, modest neckline but incredibly sophisticated, the type of dress you'd wear to important corporate events or serious business dinners. I put it on and turned to analyze my reflection with a critical and detailed eye. Elegant, without a doubt. Appropriate, certainly, but also common in the sense that there were probably 1,000 other equally beautiful black dresses scattered around the world. It didn't have that special spark, that factor, that would make someone stop and look twice. It wasn't memorable enough. I took it off too, returning it to the hanger. The third dress was red. I picked up the silky fabric carefully, feeling the incredibly soft texture slide between my fingers like water, and something in my chest tightened strangely. Even before putting the piece on, the color was intense and vibrant, a deep and rich red that promised to attract attention without needing to scream for it. And when I finally put the dress on, adjusting the hidden side zipper with fingers that trembled slightly, all the air left my lungs at once. I stood completely still in front of the mirror and simply looked at my own reflection. The dress molded to my body, as if it had been sewn specifically and exclusively for me, following every curve in a way that seemed almost impossible for something bought off the rack. The neckline showed the absolutely perfect amount of skin without being even remotely excessive or vulgar, sexy in an elegant and sophisticated way. The side slit went up my right thigh, revealing leg in a way that managed to be simultaneously sensual and refined. The fabric shimmered subtly under the fitting room's perfect lighting, and the way the dress fell and moved with my body made my silhouette look like something pulled directly from the pages of a high-fashion magazine. "Wow," I whispered to my own reflection, genuinely impressed, and a little shocked by the complete transformation. I turned slowly, watching how the dress moved with me fluidly, how the light captured different nuances of red depending on the angle, and that's when reality hit suddenly and intensely. Dante was going to see me in this dress. Dante Greco, with those 2 intense eyes and that dangerous way of looking that always made my skin heat involuntarily, was going to see me exactly like this, dressed in red and looking absolutely devastating, and the idea made something strange and confusing twist in my stomach, a complicated mixture of nervousness and anticipation that I firmly refused to analyze too deeply. I grabbed my phone from the small bench where I'd left my purse, adjusting the angle to capture the complete and perfect image in the large mirror. Zara needed to see this immediately. My best friend was going to freak out when she saw the dress, was going to ask approximately 1,000 invasive questions about the fake dinner and about Dante, and about what the hell was happening with my life. I took the photo, quickly checking if the angle was good enough, and then touched Zara's name on my contact list. My fingers were typing the message when I heard sounds from outside the fitting room, voices muffled by the thick curtain, and I could clearly distinguish Dante's impatient voice talking to the saleswoman. Outside, Dante was starting to completely lose the patience that was already naturally limited. 5 minutes had passed since Madison had entered the fitting room, then 10 minutes, then a full 15 minutes, and he could feel the irritation growing in his chest irrationally but impossible to control. How long does she need? The question came out harsher than he intended, directed at the saleswoman who was organizing some nearby pieces with professional efficiency. The saleswoman smiled with patience that clearly came from years of dealing with impatient customers. Women take time, Mr. Greco, especially when they want to make sure they'll be perfect. Dante nodded absently, but his eyes remained fixed on the fitting room's closed curtain, and something about the prolonged silence began to bother him in a way he couldn't rationally explain. She was too quiet in there, too quiet. What the hell was Madison doing that required so much time and so much silence? The possessiveness that always lurked just below the surface when it came to her began to wake up, whispering possibilities that made his jaw clench. He got up from the comfortable chair, where the saleswoman had insisted he wait, crossing the boutique's elegant space with long, determined strides until he stopped in front of Madison's fitting room. He knocked on the wood beside the curtain, trying to keep his voice controlled and casual. "Madison? Just a minute." Her response came quickly, but there was something in her voice, a distraction that put all his instincts on high alert. And then he heard the unmistakable sound of a cell phone notification coming from inside the fitting room, followed by the muffled sound of fingers typing quickly on a glass screen. She was on her phone, inside the fitting room, possibly taking photos, possibly sending those photos to someone. To whom? The question exploded in his mind with irrational and completely disproportionate force. "What are you doing?" The question came out loaded with authority and something dangerously close to poorly disguised jealousy. "Trying on." "Wait," Madison responded from the other side of the curtain, and he heard more sounds of movement, fabric brushing against skin, the soft click of another photo being taken. Something inside him simply broke. The irrational, possessive, and completely out-of-control jealousy exploded in his chest like a detonating bomb, and before he could rationally process the decision or consider the social consequences, his hand was pulling the heavy curtain aside with decisive force. "Who are you talking to?" The question came out almost like a growl, voice low and dangerous as he invaded the fitting room's private space without any apparent remorse. "Nobody." Madison turned quickly, eyes wide with genuine shock, phone still in her hand, and the red dress. Dante simply stopped breathing. The red dress transformed her into something absolutely devastating, hugging every delicious curve of her body in a way that made all rational thought completely abandon his mind. The neckline revealed cream-colored skin that his hands itched to touch. The slit showed long and perfect leg, and the vibrant color against her dark skin created a contrast that was simply sinful. She was holding her phone, clearly in the middle of sending some message, and the reality of the situation hit him with brutal force. She had taken a photo, dressed like that, and was sending it to someone. Chapter 4. Who are you sending that photo to?
Tell me the truth.
Dante was inside the fitting room with me, the heavy curtain still swaying slightly behind him from where he'd pulled it with force, and the tiny space that already seemed small, before now seemed absolutely microscopic with his body taking up half the available air. He was looking at the phone in my hand, with an intensity that made my skin completely break out in goosebumps. Dark eyes fixed on the illuminated screen, where the photo I'd just taken was still open. And then that gaze slowly traveled up the red dress, over my shocked face, and back to the phone with something dangerous gleaming in the dark depths. "Who are you sending that photo to?" The question came out in a low voice, too controlled, loaded with possessiveness and jealousy I could feel vibrating in the air between us. My brain took a full 3 seconds to process the completely absurd situation. "What? You can't just— I asked you a question." He took a step toward me, and suddenly he was too close, completely invading my personal space in a way that made my heart race out of control. His hand reached behind him and pulled the curtain back, completely closing the fitting room, locking us together in that tiny space. "Who are you sending that photo to?" My heart was beating so fast I could barely tell if it was anger at the blatant invasion or something completely different and infinitely more dangerous. "To Zara, my best friend, and you have no right to invade my fitting room, to read my messages, to—" Before I could finish the indignant sentence, Dante simply took the phone from my hand, with a quick, smooth movement, his eyes dropping to the screen as he scrolled through the conversation with Zara. I could see perfectly when he read each message, could see the tension in his jaw gradually relaxing as he processed the words exchanged between two friends, and something in his chest seemed to decompress slightly. I snatched the phone back from his hand forcefully, clutching the device against my chest as if to protect it from future invasions. "You're impossible. Completely impossible." You invaded my fitting room like you had some right, read my private messages without any permission, act like you own me when you don't. I don't, he agreed, but his voice came out low and intense in a way that made something tighten in my stomach. Dante took another step, eliminating the last remnant of safe distance between us, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body through the thin fabric of the dress. But when I saw you with the phone in your hand, taking a photo in that dress, his jaw visibly tensed, and I could see the muscle jumping under his skin. I thought you were sending it to another man, and he paused, dark eyes searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. I really didn't like that. It took a moment for his words to fully process in my confused brain. You were jealous? The incredulity in my voice was genuine and absolute, because the idea of Dante Greco, powerful and controlled man, getting irrationally jealous over a photo he didn't even know who it was being sent to, seemed completely surreal. Yes, a little jealous. He said each word with brutal clarity, without trying to hide or soften the admission. Irrational, possessive, and completely idiotic. He paused, his voice dropping even lower. But absolutely real. But I'm not even yours. The words came out almost like a desperate protest, trying to grasp some logic that would make sense of the whole situation. His expression changed, became more intense, more dangerous, more honest than anything I'd seen in him before. Yet, the word hung in the air between us, loaded with promise and threat in equal measures. But when I saw you in that dress, Madison, his eyes traveled completely over my body, from the neckline that showed the curve of my breasts to the slit that revealed my thigh, and returned to my face with heat that made my breath catch. All I can think about is how I'm going to kill any man who looks at you that way. All words abandoned my mind at once. You're crazy, I finally managed to whisper, because there was no other explanation for all the intensity, for the raw possessiveness in his voice, for the way he looked at me as if I were something precious and dangerous at the same time. For you, completely and hopelessly crazy. A small, dangerous smile touched his lips. And before you say this is inappropriate, that I'm your boss, that I'm crossing every possible line, I know all of that. But I can't stop, can't pretend I don't feel it. I tried to grasp some logic, some defense that made sense. This is completely ridiculous. You barely even know me. I've been watching you for 6 whole months. His voice became softer, but no less intense, loaded with truth that made something twist in my chest. I know you drink black coffee without sugar every morning, that you organize your pens by color in the pencil holder on your desk, that you smile when you think no one is watching, a small, genuine smile that lights up your entire face, that you're incredibly kind to the staff, but don't accept disrespect from anyone, no matter how important the client is. He paused, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that left me completely breathless. I know you, Madison. Much more than you think I do. My heart was beating so fast I felt dizzy, the defenses I'd built so carefully beginning to crack and crumble under the weight of his raw honesty. That doesn't change anything about what's happening here. His hand rose slowly, giving me enough time to pull back if I wanted to, but my feet seemed glued to the floor as his fingers touched my face with surprising gentleness for hands so big and strong. It changes everything, he said softly, his thumb tracing the line of my cheek with tenderness that made tears threaten my eyes. Because I don't want to pretend you're mine just for one night of business anymore. I want you to be mine for real. Completely, without any pretending. His touch burned my skin in a way that should scare me, that should make me pull back and create safe distance. I took a step back, my back hitting the cold mirror, raising my own defenses in a last, desperate effort at self-preservation. No, I'm not going to be another one of your conquests, another trophy for you to show off, another woman who fell at your feet and then got discarded when you got tired. Frustration exploded in his expression, replacing that softness with something wilder and more honest. You really think that's what this is? That you're just another one? It always is, I threw back. All the insecurities and fears I'd carried for years spilling out in desperate words. Men like you. Men like me. There are no men like me. Only me. He said these words taking a step toward me and eliminating the distance I'd created. I've never wanted a woman the way I want you. Never pursued anyone. Never had to fight for someone's attention. They always came to me, wanting my money, my power, my name. But you, he paused, breathing heavy, eyes burning into mine. You ignore me like I'm nothing, reject me every time I try to get close, drive me completely crazy with all that indifference. And still I keep coming back, keep trying because you're not a trophy, Madison. He searched for the right words, his voice becoming almost desperate. You're absolutely everything. The silence that fell over the fitting room was so complete, I could hear my own irregular breathing, my heart beating out of control, the muffled sound of movement in the boutique outside. Tears threatened to overflow from my eyes because no one had ever talked to me that way, with that raw and vulnerable honesty, and I didn't know how to process all of it. I can't, the words came out broken, whispered, loaded with genuine fear of getting hurt, of trusting and being destroyed in the end. Something softened in his expression, that desperate fury transforming into gentle understanding. You don't have to decide anything now. Don't have to give me any definitive answer. He took a step back, creating breathable space between us, but his eyes never left mine. But wear that dress tomorrow night. Come with me to dinner. Pretend to be mine for a few hours. Pause. And then, we'll see what happens. No pressure, no expectations. Before I could respond to anything, before I could fully process everything that had just happened in that tiny fitting room, Dante opened the curtain and left, letting the boutique's cold air invade the heated space, leaving me alone and trembling with emotions I couldn't name. Outside, the saleswoman was completely shocked, eyes wide, and mouth slightly open as she processed everything she'd witnessed. Mr. Greco, I don't think... Wrap up the red dress. Dante cut her off with a voice that didn't allow argument, completely back to professional mode as if he hadn't just invaded a fitting room and confessed intense feelings. And the other two as well, but she hasn't decided yet. I decided. He pulled his wallet from the inner pocket of his suit, removing a black credit card and extending it to her. Charge everything to me. It took me another 10 minutes to manage to change clothes with hands that trembled uncontrollably, to hang the red dress back on the hanger with care it didn't deserve considering the chaos it had caused, to breathe deeply several times and try to regain some control over my turbulent emotions. When I finally came out of the fitting room wearing my normal clothes again, Dante was waiting near the boutique's exit, 3 elegant bags already in his hands. The red one tomorrow night, 7 p.m. It wasn't a question. It was a calm and confident statement. I'll send someone to pick you up at your apartment. I crossed my arms, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. What if I don't go? His eyes held mine with absolute certainty. You will, because you promised you would. And you never break your promises. It's one of your most solid principles. He paused, something vulnerable flashing briefly in his gaze before being hidden again. It's one of the many things I love about you. You don't love me, I protested weakly, but the words came out without any conviction. Dante smiled, small and honest. And dangerous. I don't know yet if it's love exactly, but it's something deep and intense and real. And you feel it too, even if you don't want to admit it. I couldn't form any adequate response, any argument that wouldn't sound like an obvious lie. I need to leave now. See you tomorrow, Madison, he said softly, carrying promise and threat in equal measures. I left the boutique with quick steps, heart still beating out of control. Mind spinning in confused and chaotic circles, confused about what had just happened, attracted in a way that completely scared me, and absolutely terrified about what tomorrow's dinner could mean for everything. Chapter 5. The Fake Dinner.
She's mine.
That becomes real. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself that this was just work, just one night pretending to be Dante Greco's girlfriend in exchange for $10,000 that would pay half my debts. Just acting, just business, nothing personal or complicated. But when I got home after work and saw the 3 elegant boutique bags hanging on my apartment door with a simple card that said only 7 p.m. ED, my stomach did that annoying jump that was becoming too familiar when it came to that impossible man. I took a long shower trying to calm the nerves that insisted on manifesting, dried my hair more carefully than usual, applied makeup that managed to be elegant without seeming excessive, and then I put on the red dress, adjusting the silky fabric over my body's curves, looking at my reflection in the bathroom's small mirror, and barely recognizing the woman looking back. I looked like someone else, someone sophisticated and confident, and absolutely devastating, and part of me wondered if Dante would see through the whole mask and realize that inside, I was completely terrified. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., because of course Dante Greco would be punctual even to pick up his fake girlfriend. I took a deep breath, grabbed the small clutch that matched the dress perfectly, and opened the door prepared to see a driver, or maybe Marino. What I didn't expect was to find Dante himself there, leaning against the doorframe in a black suit that probably cost more than my car, dark eyes traveling over me slowly from top to bottom in a way that made my skin heat instantly. He simply stopped moving when he saw me, eyes widening slightly before narrowing with something that looked dangerously close to pure hunger. "You're going to kill me tonight," he finally said, his voice coming out hoarse and low in a way that made something tighten in my stomach. I forced a smile I hoped looked casual and carefree. "Great. You deserve it for invading my fitting room yesterday." Dante laughed, genuine and warm, and the sound made my heart do that stupid jump again. Fair, completely fair. He straightened, extending his arm to me with natural elegance. "Ready?" I placed my hand on his arm, feeling the firm muscles under the expensive fabric of his suit, and let him guide me to the elevator. The car was waiting in front of the building, that same luxurious and gleaming vehicle from yesterday, and Dante opened the back door for me with chivalry that seemed to come as naturally to him as breathing. I slid inside onto the soft leather seat, arranging the dress carefully, and Dante got in right after, closing the door and creating that intimate, closed bubble that made all the air seem denser. The driver pulled away smoothly, and we felt the car glide through Manhattan traffic, while silence stretched between us. Loaded with tension, I could feel vibrating in the small space. I was about to say something to break the uncomfortable silence when I felt the warmth of Dante's hand landing on my thigh exposed by the dress's slit, long fingers curving possessively over my skin. My heart immediately raced. "Rules?" I managed to ask, keeping my voice surprisingly steady considering how fast my pulse was. Dante turned to me, dark eyes meeting mine in the car's semi-darkness. "Act in love when we're in front of Victor. Touch me naturally. Smile like it's real. Call me love or baby." He paused, his thumb tracing slow circles on my thigh, in a way that was making it difficult to maintain any coherent thought. Basically, pretend you love me. I tried to completely ignore the way that simple touch was making my entire skin tingle. "For $10,000, I'll pretend absolutely anything you want." Something changed in his expression, became more intense, more vulnerable. What if it's not pretending? The air left my lungs at once, and it took me a moment to process the question loaded with meaning. "Focus on work, Dante," I finally managed to say, looking away to the window and watching New York's lights passing quickly. He didn't respond, but his hand remained on my thigh for the rest of the trip, warm and possessive and impossible to completely ignore. The restaurant was exactly the type of place where powerful men made important deals, all in shades of gold and dark red, low lighting creating an intimate atmosphere, tables separated by enough distance to guarantee privacy in conversations. The maitre d' guided us to a table in the back, where a large and intimidating man was already waiting. Short blonde hair, light blue eyes that seemed to assess everything with calculated precision, presence that occupied space almost aggressively. Viktor Kozlov stood when we approached, and he was even bigger up close, easily over 6'3", broad shoulders that stretched the fabric of his gray suit. His eyes slid from Dante to me, lingering on my face long enough to make me feel slightly uncomfortable, and then he smiled with clear approval. "This is your woman? Very beautiful. My congratulations, Dante." There was a heavy Russian accent in his words, but the English was perfect. I felt Dante's arm slide around my waist, pulling me closer to his body in a way that was both protective and possessive. "Thank you, Victor. She's special." I tried to smile convincingly, but my hand trembled slightly when Victor took it to kiss my fingers, in a gesture that should have been charming but seemed vaguely threatening. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Kozlov. Victor, please. Any woman of Dante's is a friend of mine." He indicated the chairs with a broad gesture. "Sit, sit." I ordered the house's best wine. Dinner began relatively normally. With conversations about business I pretended to understand, while Dante kept one hand on my thigh under the table, fingers absent-mindedly caressing my skin in a way that made it extremely difficult to focus on anything else. Victor asked occasional questions about how we met, how long we'd been together, and I let Dante answer most of them while I smiled at the right moments and touched his arm occasionally like a loving girlfriend would. But at some point during the second course, the acting started to become less rehearsed and more natural. Dante touched my face gently, while wiping away some sauce that had gotten on the corner of my mouth, his fingers lingering longer than necessary against my skin. He kissed my forehead when I said something that made him genuinely laugh, and the gesture was so affectionate and spontaneous that I felt my heart clench painfully. I caught myself relaxing against his body when his arm returned to my waist, caught myself really smiling when he whispered funny things in my ear about Victor, and the scariest part was that I was enjoying it. Enjoying the attention, the constant touch, the way Dante looked at me as if I were the only person in the entire restaurant, enjoying pretending this was real, that I was really loved by that impossible and dangerous man. Victor watched us with attention that seemed to read every gesture, every exchange look. "You truly love each other. I can see it in both your eyes." Dante turned to me, and the intensity in his gaze made my heart practically stop beating. "Very much," he said softly, but his eyes never left mine, and there was raw truth in that single word that made my whole world tilt dangerously. My heart raced so fast I felt dizzy, because this didn't seem like acting, didn't seem like pretending to impress a Russian client. It felt real and honest, and absolutely terrifying. That's when I noticed a man at another table was looking at me too openly, eyes traveling over my body with obvious interest that made my skin crawl uncomfortably. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the conversation between Dante and Victor about contract terms, but the stranger's gaze kept returning to me repeatedly. I felt the exact moment Dante noticed. His jaw visibly locked, the muscle jumping under his skin, and the hand that was on my thigh gripped with possessive force that should irritate me, but instead just made heat spread through my body. He pulled me even closer, eliminating any distance that existed between us on the seat, and then his lips were on my neck, kissing the sensitive skin just below my ear in a way that made my entire body shiver violently. "Dante," my whisper came out shaky, confused, absolutely lost in his touch. He whispered back in my ear, voice low and loaded with pure possessiveness. "He's looking at you. Let me show him you're mine. Only mine." My brain tried to process the words through the fog of sensations. "Is this pretending?" "No," Dante responded immediately, and there was brutal honesty in his voice that made tears threaten my eyes. "None of this is pretending, Madison. Not for me." I couldn't form any response, couldn't fully process his admission, so I just stayed there leaning against his warm body while he marked his territory clearly and unequivocally for anyone who was watching. The rest of dinner passed in a confused fog of conflicting emotions. Victor eventually signed the contract Dante had brought, declaring himself satisfied with the partnership and impressed with the family stability Dante demonstrated. "It was a pleasure doing business with you, my friend," Victor said when saying goodbye, shaking Dante's hand firmly. "The pleasure is mine," Dante responded professionally, but his eyes were on me when he spoke. Victor turned to me one last time, taking my hand and kissing my fingers again. "Take good care of her, Dante. Women like this are rare, precious as diamonds." Dante looked directly at me, and there was something so intense in his gaze that it made my heart clench painfully. "I know exactly how rare she is." The ride back was silent and loaded with tension so dense I could feel its weight pressing against my skin. Dante didn't take his hand off my thigh, fingers tracing distracted patterns that were making it impossible to form any coherent thought. I should say something, should break the silence and establish clear boundaries, should remind us both that this had been just work and pretending. But the words refused to come, and when the car stopped in front of my building, all I could do was look at Dante with my heart beating out of control and silently ask what the hell would happen now. Chapter 6. The Resistance.
No one touches you.
And the siege. The car stopped in front of my building, and the heavy silence that had filled the entire ride back continued vibrating in the air as Dante turned off the engine. He got out first, walking around the vehicle with that natural predatory grace, and opened my door, extending his hand to help me out. I accepted the help because the heels were too high to refuse chivalry, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine as he guided me out of the car, and we walked together to the building's entrance. I stopped in front of the entrance, looking for my keys in the small clutch with fingers that trembled slightly, too aware of his presence behind me, too aware of how the entire night had been confusing and intense and absolutely terrifying. "Thanks for the work," I finally managed to say, and the words came out awkward and strange because calling it work seemed wrong in every possible way. "Madison," his voice came out low, loaded with something that made my heart clench. I kept looking for my keys, avoiding looking at him because I knew if I looked into his dark eyes, all my defenses would completely crumble. "You can send the money tomorrow to my account. I'll text you my bank details." His hand took mine, long fingers wrapping around my wrist with gentle but unmistakable firmness, forcing me to stop and finally look up. "Forget the money." I blinked, confused and disoriented. "But we agreed on 10,000. You promised." "I don't want to pay to spend time with you anymore." Dante pulled me slightly closer, eliminating the safe distance I was trying to maintain, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that stole all the air from my lungs. "I just want real time. For real, without financial transaction involved." I felt my defenses rising automatically, fear settling in my chest with familiar and devastating force. "Dante, no. Why not?" The question came out genuine, almost vulnerable in a way that didn't fit the powerful man I knew. "Give me a real reason." "Because I can't." The words exploded from me with desperate force, all the fears and insecurities spilling at once. "You're dangerous, powerful, completely impossible to reach, and I'm just me. Simple, ordinary, normal, forgettable. We don't make any sense together." Something changed in his expression, became softer, but also more determined. "We make all the sense in the world. You're the only person who truly challenges me, who isn't impressed by my money or power. The only one who makes me feel real, human, not just a position or an important name." I shook my head, stepping back and hitting my back against the building's door. "And after the novelty wears off? And after you get tired of being challenged? What happens then?" My voice broke slightly. Men always get tired eventually. Always. Dante took a step toward me, closing the distance I'd created, eyes burning into mine with fierce intensity. "I am me. I don't answer for the boys out there. I'm not going to get tired of you, Madison. I've been trying to get your attention for 6 whole months. 6 complete months being rejected and ignored and still always coming back." He paused significantly. "Did I get tired at any point during those 6 months?" The answer came out in a reluctant whisper. "No." "Then stop being afraid and just try." His voice dropped to that lower, more intimate tone. Try with me. Let it happen. Tears threatened my eyes because it was everything I wanted and everything that scared me at the same time. I need to think about this. Need time to process everything. Dante took my hand delicately, lifting it to his lips and kissing my fingers with tenderness that made a tear finally escape and slide down my cheek. Think. Process as much as you need. His voice became slightly harder, more possessive. But think fast, because my patience has limits, and I'm not going to wait forever. He stepped away before I could respond, walking back to the car with measured steps, and I stood there frozen at the building's entrance, watching as he got in the vehicle and drove away into the New York night. I entered the apartment in a state of complete shock, closing the door and sliding down with my back against the wood until I sat on the cold floor, the red dress spread around me, completely confused about everything that had happened and absolutely terrified by what I felt. The following weeks were a lesson in persistence I hadn't asked to learn. Dante didn't give up, not for a single second. In fact, he increased his efforts in a way that made it impossible to completely ignore him, surrounding me with constant attention that was simultaneously irritating and incredibly touching. Flowers started arriving at my office every day without exception. Not generic florist arrangements, but carefully selected bouquets of flowers I didn't even know I liked until I saw them there. Vibrant colors that brightened my workspace. Soft perfume that reminded me of him every time I breathed. I tried to return the first ones, but the delivery person just smiled and said he had strict orders to leave them regardless of my protests. Coffee started appearing on my desk every morning. Always exactly the way I liked it. Black and without sugar, still hot and perfectly prepared. Initially, I thought it was coincidence, that someone on the team was being kind, until I realized there was always a small note next to the cup. "Thinking of you," one said. "That red dress haunts me," said another. "Good morning, Madison," written in firm masculine handwriting I was starting to recognize. Dante also started appearing at completely unexpected moments. In the hallway when I was going to a meeting, in the kitchen when I was getting water, in the parking lot when I was leaving, never invading my personal space, never pressuring or demanding, just there, present, constant, impossible to completely ignore. "Stop it," I protested one afternoon when I found another absurdly beautiful bouquet of pink peonies on my desk. Dante just smiled in that small, stubborn way of his. "Stop what? All of this? The flowers, the notes, showing up everywhere?" I gestured widely to emphasize the point. "You're being completely ridiculous. I'm being persistent," he corrected calmly, leaning against my office doorframe with studied casualness. "There's a difference." "I'm not going to give in," I declared with conviction I didn't completely feel. Dante just smiled more, that slow and dangerous smile that always made my stomach do that annoying jump. "We'll see." But the humiliating truth I didn't want to admit to anyone, especially not to myself, was that I was gradually giving in. I caught myself smiling when I read the notes, carefully keeping each one in a drawer in my office instead of throwing them away like I should. The flowers were never discarded. I kept them until they completely wilted, changing water and cutting stems to make them last longer. And worse still, I caught myself looking for him when I arrived at the club, feeling strange disappointment when I didn't see him immediately. "Bestie, you like him," Zara declared with absolute conviction one night when we went out to dinner, pointing her fork at me accusingly. "I don't," I protested automatically, but even to my own ears the denial sounded weak and unconvincing. Zara rolled her eyes so dramatically it was almost comical. "You keep the notes." I saw the drawer. There must be like 50 notes in there. I felt my face heat at the true accusation. "That doesn't prove absolutely anything. Proves everything," she laughed, clearly enjoying my obvious discomfort. "You're completely in love with him and too scared to admit it." Meanwhile, in Dante's office, Marino watched his boss with poorly disguised amusement, while Dante personally selected the flowers that would be delivered the next day. "Boss, she's giving in." Dante looked up from the florist catalog, something hopeful gleaming in his dark eyes. "How do you know?" "Yesterday she smiled when you walked into her room." Marino leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the situation. Lasted like half a second max, but she definitely smiled. A small, satisfied smile curved Dante's lips. "That's progress." The turning point happened on a busy Friday night at the club. The place was packed with clients, music pulsing, drinks flowing, electric weekend atmosphere in Manhattan. I was checking some things with the bartender when I felt hands grabbing my waist from behind too aggressively to be friendly, the strong smell of whiskey invading my senses. "Come here, hottie!" A drunk client's slurred voice sounded too close to my ear. "Let go now." I tried to break free, turning and pushing against his chest, but his fingers just gripped tighter, leaving marks on my skin through the thin fabric of my blouse. That's when Dante appeared out of nowhere, moving so fast I barely saw the blur before his fist connected with the client's face with brutal force. The man fell to the floor immediately, knocked out with a single punch, and then Dante was in front of me, hands holding my face with extreme care, eyes traveling over my entire body looking for injuries. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" His voice came out almost desperate, raw concern completely replacing the fury I'd seen seconds before. I was shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline still running through my system. "No, I didn't finish the sentence. Because Dante pulled me into a hug so tight, it almost crushed the air from my lungs, one hand on the back of my head, the other around my waist, holding as if I would disappear if he let go. Nobody touches you. Nobody. Ever. And it was in that moment, with my heart beating out of control, and my body trembling in his strong arms, that all my defenses finally completely crumbled. "Dante," my voice came out broken, vulnerable, completely lost. He pulled back just enough to look at my face, hands still holding me as if I were precious and fragile. Enough running from me, enough resisting what's happening between us. His eyes searched mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "You feel it. I know you feel it too." The tears finally overflowed, sliding down my cheeks. "I feel it, but I'm so scared, Dante." "Of me?" Something pained passed through his expression. "Of you hurting me eventually. Of being just temporary. Another one who passed through your life." The truth came out in a broken whisper. Dante took my face between his hands with tenderness that contrasted completely with the violence he'd shown seconds before. "You're never temporary. You're forever. Everything. Complete. If you let me. What if it goes wrong?" The question came out in a small voice, scared, vulnerable. His eyes held mine with absolute certainty. What if it goes completely right? The silence stretched between us, loaded with 6 months of tension and resistance and fear, and then I heard my own voice saying words I didn't know I was ready to say. "Kiss me." Dante froze completely. "What? If you want it so badly, if you really feel all of this." I swallowed hard, gathering courage. "Kiss me, now, here." He didn't wait another second. His lips met mine with desperate hunger, 6 months of waiting and frustration and desire pouring into that single kiss. Intense and devastating and absolutely perfect. My arms went up around his neck automatically, fingers burying in his dark hair, and he pulled me even closer until there was no space between our bodies. When we finally separated, both breathless and trembling, my voice came out in a shaky whisper. "That was inevitable," Dante completed, his forehead resting against mine. "This was always inevitable from the first moment." "I'm still scared," I admitted honestly, because the fear hadn't magically disappeared. It had just been overcome by something stronger. Dante kissed my forehead with tenderness that made more tears fall. "Then be scared with me. Be scared, but don't leave me, please." "Okay." The word came out small but firm, a surrender and a promise at the same time. "Okay?" He pulled back to look at my face. Hope and disbelief mixed in his expression. "Let's try, you and me. But if you hurt me," I started to warn. "I'll kill myself first," Dante interrupted with absolute conviction. I couldn't help but laugh through the tears. Dramatic. His lips curved into that small, genuine smile I was learning to love. "For you, always." Chapter 7. Together
I never stopped loving you.
and challenges. The first few weeks after that kiss were like living in a dream I still feared waking up from, only to discover it had never been real. Dante was possessive in ways that should irritate me, but instead just made me feel protected and wanted. Always with a hand on my waist when we were together, always pulling me close when someone looked too long. But he was also surprisingly sweet, remembering small things I mentioned in passing, showing up with my favorite chocolate when I'd had a bad day, sending silly messages in the middle of the workday just to make me smile. I was still learning to completely trust, still had moments where the fear came back and made me question if this was too real to last, but Dante was incredibly patient with my insecurities, always reassuring me with words and touches, and that intense gaze that said more than 1,000 declarations. And the chemistry between us was absolutely absurd, electric and constant. Every touch setting fire to my skin, every look loaded with promises that made my heart race. One night, I went to his apartment after work, still getting used to the idea that I had permission to just show up unannounced, that he really wanted my constant presence. I opened the door with the key he'd given me the previous week, finding strange sounds and a slightly burnt smell coming from the kitchen. I walked over there and stopped at the entrance, watching with growing amusement as Dante Greco, Italian Mafia boss, desperately tried to save something that was smoking in a pan on the stove. "You burned water?" I couldn't hold back the laugh that exploded from me as I processed the completely ridiculous scene. Dante turned with a spatula in hand, an expression between frustration and embarrassment on his handsome face. "I'm a Mafia boss, not a chef." "Clearly." I kept laughing, approaching and gently taking the spatula from his hand before he caused more disaster. "Let me cook before you burn down the entire apartment." I started assessing the damage, throwing away what was hopelessly burned and checking what could still be saved, when I felt Dante's arm slide around my waist from behind, pulling me back against his broad chest. "I'd rather watch you cook," he murmured in my ear, his warm breath making shivers run down my spine. I smiled, relaxing against his body and finally accepting that this was my new reality, that I had permission to be this happy. "Then watch in silence and don't get in the way." A few days later, I entered Dante's office at the club, carrying reports that needed his approval, lightly knocking on the door before pushing it open. He was sitting behind the large desk, focused on some documents, but his dark eyes immediately lifted when they heard me enter, and something changed in his expression, became darker, more intense, more hungry. "Lock the door." His voice came out in a low command that made heat spread through my body instantly. I blinked, confused and curious. "Why?" Dante leaned back in his chair, watching me with that predatory look that always made my stomach jump. "Because I need you. Now." My heart raced, but I tried to maintain some rationality. "Dante, it's the middle of the day. We have work." He stood in a fluid movement, walking around the desk with measured steps, and before I could fully process his intention, I was being pulled onto his lap in the large chair, his hands firm on my waist. "I don't care one bit," he murmured against my lips before kissing me with a hunger that made all rational thought completely abandon my mind. The reports fell forgotten to the floor, but happiness, I was learning the hard way, never lasted without complications when you got involved with men like Dante Greco. The bomb exploded on a Thursday afternoon when Marino entered my office with a serious expression that immediately put me on alert. "Viktor Kozlov found out," he said without beating around the bush, and my stomach dropped because I knew exactly what that meant. The meeting that happened in Dante's office an hour later confirmed my worst fears. Victor had discovered that the dinner had been a complete farce, that I wasn't Dante's girlfriend at that time, that everything had been an elaborate lie to make the Russian sign the contract. And Viktor Kozlov wasn't a man who took being deceived lightly, but the part that really destroyed me was discovering the extent of Dante's lie. "You lied?" The fury exploded from me when Marino explained everything, when he revealed that Victor had never required Dante to have a girlfriend, that whole story had been a complete invention, just to manipulate me into spending time with him. "There was never any need to pretend to be a girlfriend." Dante turned to me, and there was guilt and desperation mixed in his expression. "I needed an excuse to spend time with you. You constantly rejected me, never gave me a chance. You used me." Tears burned my eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything I'd felt. Manipulated me, lied, created this whole fake situation. "No." He took a step toward me, but I immediately backed away. "I wanted you. There's a huge difference between using and desperately wanting." I shook my head, tears finally overflowing and sliding down my cheeks. "You broke my trust." I left the office before he could respond, before his words could convince me this was less serious than it really was. I ignored when he called me, ignored the footsteps following behind me, just ran to my car and drove home in a state of complete shock. The phone rang 17 times that night, 17 calls from Dante that I let go straight to voicemail, each ring making my heart clench painfully, but my determination remained firm. Messages started arriving too, dozens of them, ranging from desperate apologies to pleas for me to answer, to let him explain properly. Around 11 at night, I heard insistent knocking on my door, followed by Dante's muffled voice from the other side. "Madison, please open the door. Let me explain." I was sitting on my bedroom floor, hugging my knees to my chest, tears constantly wetting my face. "I knew it," I whispered to the empty room, the pain of betrayal consuming everything. I knew he'd eventually hurt me. The knocking continued for another 20 minutes before finally stopping, and the silence that followed was somehow even worse. In his office, Dante was destroyed in ways Marino had never seen before. The normally controlled and ruthless man was completely falling apart, hands buried in his hair, breathing irregular, eyes red in a way that suggested tears he refused to shed in front of witnesses. "Boss, Victor is coming to New York," Marino said carefully, knowing he needed to keep focus on practical matters. "He's threatening open war if you don't compensate for the dishonor. You need to focus on—" "Screw Victor!" Dante exploded with fury that made Marino step back. "I lost her. I lost the only thing that really matters, and you want me to focus on business?" Marino watched his boss for a long moment, seeing the genuine desperation in his expression, and something softened. "You really love her, more than anything." Dante's voice came out broken, honest, completely vulnerable. "More than this empire, more than money, more than power. And I ruined everything with an idiotic lie." The situation escalated from bad to catastrophic the next morning, when Victor decided the best way to get to Dante was through me. I was leaving my building for work, when unknown men surrounded me, a hand covering my mouth before I could scream, and everything went black when something was pressed against my nose. When Dante received Victor's call saying he had kidnapped me, something inside him simply completely broke. Marino had never seen that level of cold, calculated fury, that murderous determination that transform Dante into something absolutely terrifying. "Mobilize everyone," Dante ordered with a voice that promised brutal violence. "All the men, all the resources, everything we have. I'll burn this entire city down until I find her." The rescue happened in less than 6 hours, Dante personally leading the invasion of the warehouse where Victor was keeping me. I woke up tied to a chair, head throbbing, when I heard sounds of fighting and gunshots from outside. And then the door exploded and Dante was there, clothes stained with blood that probably wasn't his, wild eyes searching until they found me. "You touched her!" Dante's roar echoed through the empty space as he advanced on Victor with clear homicidal intent. Victor smiled humorlessly, grabbing a gun. "You lied to me, and I'll lie 1,000 times if it's to protect her." Dante launched himself at the Russian before he could shoot, and the fight that followed was brutal and quick, ending with Victor knocked out on the floor, and Dante running toward me. I woke up in the hospital surrounded by sterile white, head still aching but not as intensely, and the first thing I saw was Dante sleeping uncomfortably in a chair beside the bed, his hand holding mine even unconscious, his face marked with worry even in sleep. "You stayed." My voice came out hoarse, surprised and touched at the same time. His eyes opened immediately, and the relief that flooded his expression was so intense that new tears threatened my eyes. "I always stay. I'll always stay, Madison. Always." I remembered the betrayal, the lie that had caused all of this. "You lied about the dinner." "I lied about the dinner," he admitted without hesitation, moving to sit on the edge of the bed, his free hand touching my face with extreme tenderness. "Yes, completely. But lying about my feelings. Never, not once." His eyes held mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "I love you, Madison. Real, deep. Forever. That was never a lie." The tears finally overflowed, sliding down my cheeks. "I love you too, you possessive idiot." Dante laughed, and there were tears in his eyes too, sliding down his face while he smiled. "You're a possessive idiot. Forever." He kissed me with tenderness that contrasted with the usual intensity, and I allowed myself to finally believe this was real, that we were real, that his love was genuine despite all the mistakes. Chapter 8. Together?
Marry me.
Forever. 6 months later. Life had transformed into something I never imagined possible. Something so good that sometimes I still woke up afraid it was a dream about to end. But then I'd feel Dante's arm around my waist, hear his breathing against my neck, and reality would settle in with comforting force. I was still the manager of Velvet Rose, because Dante had insisted my work was too important to abandon, but now I was also officially the owner's girlfriend, a position that came with curious looks from the staff, but also genuine respect, because everyone knew I'd earned that place on my own merit. Dante continued being possessive in ways that made anyone looking immediately realize I was his, always with some part of his body touching mine when we were together, always pulling me close when someone got too close. But he'd also learned to be respectful of my boundaries, never suffocating or controlling me, and I had become confident in that love in ways I never thought I'd be capable of, deeply loved, completely happy in ways that before seemed impossible. We were inseparable in a way that made Marino constantly roll his eyes, but even he had to admit we worked perfectly together, balancing each other in unexpected ways. Saturday afternoon had started peacefully, with Dante insisting we needed to go shopping because I needed new clothes, a transparent excuse to spoil me that I'd learned to accept without much resistance. We were in one of the luxury boutiques he frequented, me trying on some pieces, while Dante waited outside the fitting room with patience that was gradually running out. "How long do you need?" His voice sounded from the other side of the curtain after approximately 10 minutes, loaded with poorly disguised impatience. "Patience," I responded while adjusting a blue dress in the mirror, critically analyzing the fit. "I don't have any patience." "It's been a full 10 minutes. I rolled my eyes even knowing he couldn't see. "It's been 5 minutes max." I heard Marino outside, clearly trying not to laugh. "Boss, you're being incredibly dramatic. What if she's taking a photo again?" Dante responded, and I could hear genuine anxiety mixed with that possessive jealousy that had become his trademark. "You're still jealous about that?" Marino sounded genuinely incredulous. "That was 6 months ago and it was a photo for her best friend." "I'll always be jealous," Dante declared without any embarrassment. I finished getting ready and came out of the fitting room wearing a casual but elegant dress, smiling when I saw Dante's expression immediately light up when he saw me. "Like it?" His eyes traveled completely over my body before narrowing slightly with suspicion. "Are you taking a photo of this?" I couldn't hold back the laugh that exploded from me at the ridiculous question. "No. Not yet, at least." "Madison," he began with a warning tone. "Relax completely." I kept laughing, approaching him and touching his chest affectionately. "I only send to Zara when I take a photo, like I always do." Dante pulled me closer, hands landing possessively on my waist. "This time I'm taking the photo, of both of us together." Before I could respond, he was already grabbing his own phone, pulling me against his body, and raising the device to capture a selfie of the two of us. I smiled genuinely in the photo, relaxed and happy in ways that cameras easily captured now, and when I looked at the image on his screen, my heart clenched with pure affection. We looked so happy, so perfectly matched, so obviously in love. Perfect, Dante murmured, kissing my hair with tenderness. The following week passed in a comfortable routine of work and stolen moments together. Quiet dinners at his apartment that had become ours without formal discussion. Nights watching movies intertwined on the couch. Mornings waking up in each other's arms. It was domestic and wonderful, and everything I never knew I wanted. Until one Thursday night, Dante asked me to go to Velvet Rose even though it was my day off, saying only that he needed me there at 8 p.m. I arrived at the agreed time wearing a simple but pretty dress, expecting perhaps some important meeting or last-minute event that needed my supervision. What I didn't expect was to find the club completely empty. "Dante?" I called, entering the dark space. Only a few strategic lights illuminating the environment and creating an intimate and almost romantic atmosphere. "Why did you close the entire club?" He appeared from the shadows near the bar, devastatingly handsome in a dark suit, that small, nervous smile I rarely saw curving his lips. "Because I need complete privacy for what I'm going to do." My heart started beating faster, some part of me recognizing what was about to happen before my brain fully processed it. "Privacy for what?" Dante walked toward me with measured steps, every movement loaded with intention, and when he stopped in front of me, he simply knelt on the club's marble floor, one hand going to the inner pocket of his suit and removing a small velvet box. My breathing stopped completely. "Madison DeLuca," he began, and there was raw emotion in his voice that made tears immediately burn my eyes. "You ignored me for 6 long months when we met, repeatedly rejected me, drove me completely crazy with your indifference." He opened the box, revealing an absolutely stunning ring that sparkled under the soft lights. "And I loved every second of it, because you challenged me, completed me, made me want to be better in every way. Marry me? Let me be your possessive idiot forever?" Tears were already sliding freely down my cheeks, sobs of pure happiness escaping as I processed the moment. But some mischievous part of me couldn't resist reminding him of everything that had happened. "You invaded my fitting room," I managed to say through tears and simultaneous laughter. A small, guilty smile touched his lips. "I invaded completely. You got jealous of a photo I was sending to Zara." "I got absurdly and irrationally jealous," he admitted without hesitation. "You lied about the dinner with Victor." "I lied shamelessly to have an excuse to spend time with you," Dante agreed, and there was humor mixed with regret in his dark eyes. I took a step toward him, touching his face with trembling hands. "And even so, despite all of that, I love you more than anything in this world." The hope that lit up his expression was absolutely beautiful. "So marry me?" "Yes," the word came out amid happy sobs. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Dante stood in a fluid movement, removing the ring from the box and sliding it onto my finger with hands that trembled slightly, and then pulled me into a kiss so full of love and promise and happiness that I felt like I would explode with all of it. When we finally separated, both laughing and crying at the same time, sounds of applause echoed through the club. I turned surprised and found Marino, Zara, and members of our team coming out from behind the bar and curtains, all smiling and enthusiastically applauding. Zara had tears in her eyes too, and Marino was recording everything on his phone with a huge smile. "You were all hiding this whole time?" I asked incredulously, but laughing through the tears. "We weren't going to miss this for anything," Zara responded, coming to hug me tightly while admiring the ring. "Finally, you two took so long." 1 year later, the apartment we now officially shared was bathed in golden late afternoon light, and I was in the bedroom getting ready for a dinner we'd planned with friends. I had just put on a new dress I'd bought during the week, emerald green that Dante would definitely approve of, and turned to the full-length mirror to check how it looked. I grabbed my phone almost by instinct, adjusting the angle to capture the perfect image, and was about to send it to Zara when I heard Dante's voice from the bedroom door, loaded with that familiar mixture of amusement and possessiveness that always made me laugh. "Who are you sending that photo to?" I turned with the biggest smile on my face, rolling my eyes dramatically. "Seriously? This again?" Dante entered the bedroom with that mischievous smile that still made my heart race even after all this time together. "Always. You're completely mine." "It's for Zara," I protested, laughing, because this had become a recurring joke between us. "Like it always is. When are you going to learn?" He pulled me into his arms, his wedding ring cold against my skin when his hands landed on my waist. "I know exactly who you send them to, but I like reminding you anyway." I turned in his arms, interlacing my fingers behind his neck, wedding rings sparkling under the light. Reminding me of what exactly? His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that still stole my breath after all this time. "That you're mine, only mine, forever." I smiled, rising on my tiptoes to kiss him softly. "Forever." And when he kissed me back, with all the intensity and love and promise that had characterized our relationship from the beginning, I knew with absolute certainty that I had found my forever in that impossible, possessive, and perfectly imperfect man who had invaded my fitting room, and my heart with equal determination. Our story had started with a lie about a fake dinner, had survived betrayals and kidnappings and deep fears, and had transformed into something real and true and absolutely unbreakable. It had always been the right answer, from the very first moment.